Welcome into another edition of the Creighton Basketball Newsletter video version. I'm Jon Nyatawa with the World-Herald, here to talk some Jays hoops. Creighton is coming off a really disappointing defeat at Villanova. We don't even need to mention the score, a lot to a little. The Wildcats dominated just the final 30 minutes. It was actually pretty back and forth early, but that physicality wore into the Jays once again, and Creighton offensively just could not find a rhythm. So they've had a weekend to let it soak in and work on a lot of the things that maybe caused them problems at Villanova. And now it's a big week for Creighton. And it's interesting the way the schedule lays out for Creighton in Big East play, because you look at this conference and it really does feel like there's 5 teams that have kind of separated themselves from the pack, that have proven a lot. That's Providence, Villanova, Xavier, Seton Hall, and UConn. Those 5 teams had strong non-conference seasons, a ton of talent, a ton of veteran talent. They look like 5 NCAA tournament teams. So if you're a Creighton squad that's young, still has more to prove, but has aspirations to make it to the NCAA tournament, you obviously got to perform well against those teams. So far, obviously, the Jays are only 3 games into Big East play, but they played Villanova twice and got that big win at home against the Wildcats in the middle of December. So that's important. That's obviously key for the resume and key for confidence, but you obviously have to do it again. And the way the schedule lays out, again, it's interesting. Creighton just played at Villanova, and these 2 games this week, Providence at home, at Xavier, you got this sort of trio of tests, right? Sort of clustered together at Villanova, Providence at home, at Xavier. There's going to be another trio of tests at the end of the month. Creighton hosts Xavier at the last game of January, and then opens February with 2 road trips at UConn and at Seton Hall. So those 3 games, big test. Then at the end of the year, Creighton plays at Providence and finishes up the regular season with home games against UConn and Seton Hall. Another trio of tests. So if you're Creighton, obviously the Jays, the players, the coaches, they're not thinking ahead. They're thinking about Providence and how can they handle that the Providence physicality and what to counter schematically and strategically against those guys. But from a big picture perspective, I'm looking at this week. I'm looking at those trio games at the end of the month and at the start of February, and then the trio games at the end of the year. Those 3 sets of 3 games, that's going to determine whether Creighton makes the NCAA tournament or not. Because the selection committee, while it does value, there's certainly value in beating the teams you're supposed to beat and avoiding bad losses. And aside from the Arizona State game, Creighton's done that. But how you perform against teams that are projected to be in the NCAA tournament field or have a chance to be in the NCAA tournament field, I guess you'd include Marquette in that mix, the way the Golden Eagles have played over the last week, and their net ranking has skyrocketed upward. I'm not sure if I'm ready to include Marquette in that group of top 5 Big East teams, but for the sake of argument, you can make the case that, yeah, Creighton's picked up a quality win by going to Marquette and stealing that win in overtime. So we'll note that. But I think that the NCAA tournament selection committee is really going to take a hard look at how Creighton performs against Providence, Xavier, UConn, Villanova, Seton Hall, those teams that are clearly NCAA tournament caliber. You got to prove that you earn the right to get into the field. So we talk a lot about quad 1 and quad 2 games, and those matter, but I'm just going to be really curious to see how Creighton fares against those teams. You look back in 2018, 2019, when Creighton missed the NCAA tournament, just barely missed it. Obviously, they made a run at the end of the year, put themselves in position that if they could have gotten hot in the Big East tournament, they could have made the NCAA tournament. Ultimately, the Jays went to the NIT and won a couple games, made it to the quarterfinals. But that season, the Jays did struggle against the teams that made the NCAA tournament. Villanova, Seton Hall, St. John's, Marquette. They went 1-7 against those teams. And I think ultimately that's, when the selection committee is evaluating your resume, they look at, hey, how did you perform against the teams that we're going to put in this field? And so that ultimately, I think, kept them out. And they had a lot of chances in those games, by the way. They led Seton Hall late twice that year and had Villanova on the ropes on the road. And Marquette, I think we all can remember that game where Creighton had a 5-point lead with 10 seconds left and lost it in overtime. Marcus Howard went off. So Creighton's going to be in position to have a chance to beat some of these teams, even though they do have a lot of experience and some talent. It's a matter of getting it done and making the key plays down the stretch in games where both teams really want to win. I mean, Providence is coming into this game with a lot of urgency. The Friars got rolled by Marquette and had a bounce-back win at home against St. John's, but they're thinking that they have a chance to compete for a Big East championship, and they know that you can't drop games on the road to teams that maybe aren't at that level at this moment. So we'll see. We'll see how Creighton responds after Villanova, and we'll see if they can match the intensity and the attacking mentality that Providence is sure to bring to Omaha. When these two teams have faced off against one another, at least here in this building, in the CHI Health Center, we've gotten some really good games. And so I think Tuesday's going to be that. And then after Tuesday's, no matter what the result is, Creighton's going to have to, recover or shake off the highs and figure out a way to deal with Xavier on the road, a place where Creighton has not played well, at least lately. So we'll see. We'll see what the Jays do. I'm really curious how they handle this week. I mean, obviously, all games in Big East play are important. You got to put together a quality record to get in contention to stay on the right side of the bubble, I guess you could say. But how Creighton fares against that top portion of the league, I think, is key for this team. Not just from an NCAA tournament perspective, which I spent a lot of time talking about today, but also just from their confidence and from a confidence standpoint. Like, those are the teams they want to compete with. Those are the teams they want to beat. These players came to Creighton with the idea of building off the historic run that the Jays had over the last 2 seasons when they won a share of the Big East championship in 2020 and made a Sweet 16 last year. They want some of that success too, but you got to prove it first, and you got to earn it against some of these teams that, again, are extremely seasoned and are playing with a lot on the line. So it's a prove it week for Creighton, and they have had some time to recover and figure out some things after Villanova, so we'll see how they respond. That's all for this week for me. I appreciate you watching. We've got plenty of coverage. Like I said, it's a big week for the Jays, so we'll have plenty of coverage on this team. Providence on Tuesday, Xavier on Saturday. So that's fun. That's what college basketball is about, to have to be tested on a big stage like this, and Creighton's in a conference where it's going to get a lot of these. So again, thanks for watching. We'll be back here next week.